They say the person you marry is not the person you divorce. But for Linda, the realization didn't happen over years. It happened in a single, shattering second. On the morning she was set to receive her doctorate, her husband of 7 years, Marcus, didn't hand her a bouquet of roses. He handed her a manila envelope containing divorce papers. He told her she was holding him back. He told her he needed a woman with power, status, and ambition. He had no idea that the shy, quiet wife he was discarding was exactly 3 minutes away from answering a phone call that would change the landscape of the tech world forever. He thought he was dropping dead weight. In reality, he was walking away from an $800 million empire. The morning sun hit the marble countertops of the penthouse kitchen, illuminating dust motes that danced in the light. It was a beautiful day in Seattle, crisp, clear, and brimming with the kind of promise that only comes once in a lifetime. Linda Vance stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the hallway, adjusting the velvet hood of her doctoral gown. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a cocktail of exhaustion and exhilaration. 7 years. It had taken her 7 years of sleepless nights, double shifts at a diner, and freelance coding gigs to get here. She smoothed the front of her simple black dress beneath the gown. It wasn't designer. It was from a rack at a department store, bought 3 years ago. She hadn't bought new clothes in ages because every spare dollar had gone into 2 things: Marcus's startup, Sterling Dynamics, and her own secret tuition. "Marcus," she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the expansive apartment. "Are you ready? The ceremony starts at 10. If we leave now, we can grab a coffee." Marcus Sterling walked out of his home office. He was impeccable. He wore a bespoke Italian suit, charcoal grey, cut to accentuate his broad shoulders. On his wrist sat a Rolex Daytona, a gift she had bought him after he closed his Series A funding round. He looked like the cover of Forbes, the very image of the rising tech mogul. But his face was unreadable. Cold. "We aren't going to the ceremony, Linda," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth that used to greet her in the mornings. Linda froze, her hand hovering over her graduation cap on the console table. She laughed nervously. "What?" "Marcus, stop joking. It's my doctorate. I'm the first person in my family to— I'm not joking." He walked over to the kitchen island, picked up a thick manila envelope, and tossed it onto the granite. It landed with a heavy thud that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "I filed these yesterday," he said, crossing his arms. "I wanted to wait until after your little party, but honestly, I can't pretend for another afternoon. I'm done, Linda." Linda stared at the envelope. The bold text at the top was upside down, but she recognized the legal formatting immediately. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her blood turned to ice. "Divorce. Marcus, we just celebrated your company's IPO last week. We're happy. What are you talking about?" Marcus sighed, a sound of profound annoyance, as if he were explaining a complex algorithm to a child. He walked over to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, and poured himself a glass, not offering her one. "We were happy when I was a struggling nobody, and you were the supportive wife making sandwiches," Marcus said, taking a sip. "But look at us now. Look at me. Sterling Dynamics is valued at $50 million. I'm meeting with venture capitalists from Silicon Valley next week. I'm attending galas. I'm building a legacy." "And I helped you build it." Linda's voice rose, cracking. "I wrote the initial back-end code for your prototype, Marcus. I worked 2 jobs so you didn't have to take a salary for 3 years. I'm finally finishing my degree so I can join you officially." Marcus laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "Join me? Linda, you're getting a degree in advanced computational linguistics. It's academic fluff. It's cute, but it's not business." He set the glass down and looked her up and down, his eyes filled with a disdain that physically hurt her. "Let's be real. You're a waitress at heart. You wear department store clothes. You get nervous at charity dinners. You don't know how to talk to people like the Vanderwalls or the Rothschilds. You're plain. And I need a power couple image. I need a wife who walks into a room and commands attention, not one who blends into the wallpaper." Linda felt tears pricking her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She gripped the edge of the table. "Is there someone else?" Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second, then shrugged. "Her name is Tiffany. Tiffany Vanderwall." The air left Linda's lungs. Tiffany Vanderwall, the daughter of Richard Vanderwall, the CEO of Vanderwall Corp., one of the biggest investment firms on the West Coast. Tiffany was a socialite, a model, a woman who had never worked a day in her life, but graced every magazine cover in the city. "She understands my world," Marcus said, his tone softening only when he said her name. "She can open doors for me that you can't even knock on. My lawyers have drawn up a fair settlement. You get the old Honda, $20,000 in cash, and you keep your student debt. I keep the company, the apartment, and the assets." $20,000? Linda whispered. "Marcus, your company is worth $50 million. I own half of it by law." "We didn't sign a prenup." Marcus smirked, leaning forward, his hands bracing on the counter. "Actually, you'll find that the initial back-end code you wrote was done before we were married, and you signed a waiver of rights to intellectual property 3 years ago when I incorporated. You didn't read the fine print, did you? You just trusted me." The memory flashed in her mind. A late night, pizza boxes on the floor, Marcus stressed out of his mind about paperwork. "Just sign here, babe. It's just standard formality, so the investors don't get spooked." She had signed. She had trusted him with her life. "You tricked me," she said, her voice trembling. "I protected my asset," he corrected. "Sign the papers, Linda. Don't make this messy. If you fight me, I have the best lawyers in the state. I'll drag it out until you're bankrupt and homeless. Take the 20 grand. Go finish your little graduation. Start a new life somewhere. Smaller. Somewhere that fits you." Linda looked at the man she had loved since they were 20 years old. She looked at the face she had kissed 1,000 times, and suddenly the love evaporated. It didn't fade. It was incinerated by the sheer heat of his betrayal. She looked down at the papers. Then she looked at the clock on the microwave. 9:45 a.m. In 15 minutes, the market would open. In 15 minutes, a non-disclosure agreement she had signed under a pseudonym would expire. Marcus thought she was just a student. He thought her late nights in the library were spent studying for exams. He had no idea that for the past 2 years, Linda had been the lead architect for Project Ethelgard, a revolutionary AI translation protocol. She had been working anonymously under the handle EV Cipher. And she wasn't just finishing a degree, she was finalizing a buyout. Richard Vanderwall, Tiffany's father, had been trying to find the identity of EV Cipher for 6 months. He wanted to buy the protocol for his firm, but he had been outbid by Vertex Global, the largest tech conglomerate in the world. The offer on the table wasn't $50 million. It was $800 million. Linda wiped a stray tear from her cheek. Her posture straightened. The trembling in her hands stopped. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw him for what he was. Small. "You're right, Marcus," she said softly. Marcus blinked, surprised by her sudden capitulation. "I am?" "Yes. We aren't on the same level." She reached into her bag, not for a tissue, but for a pen. She didn't use the cheap Bic from the counter. She pulled out a heavy, black Mont Blanc pen, a gift sent to her by the CEO of Vertex Global last week. She flipped to the signature page. "You want a clean break?" she asked, her voice steady, terrifyingly calm. "You want me out of your life, out of your company, and out of your future? Permanently?" "Yes," Marcus said, though he frowned slightly, unnerved by the shift in her demeanor. "It's for the best." "Okay." Linda signed her name with a flourish. Linda Vance. She dated it. She pushed the papers back across the marble toward him. "I'll pack my things and be gone by tonight," she said. "But Marcus? One piece of advice." "What?" he scoffed, picking up the papers to check the signature. "When you go to your meeting with the Vanderwalls next week, make sure you check the news first." Just then, her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up. The caller ID didn't show a number. It simply read, "The chairman." Marcus glanced at the phone, confused. "Who is that?" Linda picked up the phone. She didn't answer him. She pressed the green button and brought the device to her ear. "This is Linda," she said, her eyes locking with Marcus's. "Yes. I'm ready to close. Send the jet." She turned around, her graduation gown billowing behind her like a cape, and walked out the door without looking back. Linda stepped out of the luxury apartment complex's revolving doors and into the crisp Seattle air. For the first time in 7 years, she didn't feel the crushing weight of Marcus's expectations. She felt light, albeit a terrifying kind of lightness, like stepping off a cliff ledge. She didn't walk to the bus stop. She didn't walk to her rusty Honda Civic parked around the block. Instead, a sleek, matte black Maybach pulled up to the curb the second her foot touched the pavement. The rear door opened, and a man in a sharp suit stepped out. He wasn't a chauffeur. He carried himself with the lethal grace of private security. "Dr. Vance?" he asked. "Not Mrs. Sterling." "Dr. Vance." "That's me," Linda said, her voice stronger than it had been in the kitchen. "Mr. Thorne sends his regards. We are on a tight schedule. The board is waiting in New York." Linda slid into the leather interior of the car. It smelled of expensive cedar and new money. As the door clicked shut, sealing her off from the noise of the city and from Marcus, she allowed herself one moment of weakness. She pulled her knees to her chest, buried her face in the velvet graduation gown, and let out a single, ragged sob. It wasn't for the loss of the money. It was for the loss of the time. The late nights she had spent debugging Marcus's code while he slept. The times she had skipped meals so he could buy a better suit for a pitch meeting. She had poured herself into him until she was empty, and he had discarded the shell. "Dr. Vance," the driver said softly, looking through the rearview mirror. "There is a garment bag in the seat next to you. The chairman thought you might want to arrive in something more fitting for your new station." Linda looked to her right, a black garment bag with the gold insignia of Vertex Global. She unzipped it. Inside was not a department store dress, but a tailored white power suit from a designer whose name she usually only saw in magazines, paired with blood-red stilettos. It was armor. "Thank you," she whispered. She wiped her eyes. The tears were done. The mourning period was over. It had lasted exactly 3 minutes. Meanwhile, 20 floors up, the mood was celebratory. Marcus Sterling stood on the balcony of his penthouse, a glass of Dom Perignon in his hand. The view of the Space Needle was spectacular, but he was more interested in the blonde woman draped over the chaise lounge behind him. Tiffany Vanderwall was everything Linda wasn't. Loud, vibrant, and dripping in diamonds. She giggled, checking her reflection in her phone. "Did she cry?" Tiffany asked, taking a sip of her champagne. please tell me, she cried. It's so tragic, really. The poor little waitress. Marcus chuckled, turning back to the room. She was surprisingly quiet. I think she was in shock. She signed the papers and left. It's better this way. She would have never survived the gala season. Can you imagine Linda trying to make small talk with the senators? She would have worn polyester, Tiffany sneered, wrinkling her nose. You made the right choice, baby. You're a CEO now. You need a queen, not a peasant. The elevator doors to the penthouse slid open with a chime. A man stormed in, his face flushed red, his tie loosened. It was Richard Vanderwall, Tiffany's father, and the titan of Seattle venture capital. "Daddy!" Tiffany squealed. "Marcus just did it. He's free!" Richard didn't smile. He ignored his daughter and marched straight to Marcus, slamming a thick portfolio onto the coffee table, shattering a crystal coaster. "You idiot!" Richard roared. Marcus froze, his glass halfway to his mouth. "Richard, what's wrong? I thought you'd be happy. The merger between Sterling Dynamics and Vanderwall Corp is clear now without her marital assets in the way." "The merger?" Richard laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Forget the merger, Marcus. Do you know what just happened on the global market 10 minutes ago?" Marcus shook his head, confused. "No, I've been dealing with the divorce. While you were dumping your wife, Vertex Global just announced the acquisition of Project Ethelgard." Richard spat. "Do you know what that is?" "The translation, AI," Marcus shrugged. "I heard rumors. Some anonymous coder named Cypher. What does that have to do with us?" "It has everything to do with us." Richard began to pace, his hands shaking. "That protocol renders our entire tech stack obsolete, Marcus. Your company, Sterling Dynamics, relies on language processing for your customer service bots. This new tech, it's quantum leap stuff. It processes sentiment, context, sarcasm, dialect. It's human. And Vertex just bought it for $800 million. Marcus's eyes widened. 800 million? Who is Cypher? "Nobody knows," Richard yelled. "I had my best investigators on it. We offered 50 million last week. We were laughed at. Vertex swooped in and bought the exclusive rights. Whoever this Cypher is, they just became one of the richest players in the tech world overnight. And worse, Vertex is going to use that tech to crush us." Marcus set his drink down, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Okay, calm down. We can pivot. We can't pivot if we're bankrupt," Richard snarled. "I need to find out who Cypher is. If I can get to them before the ink dries, maybe I can offer them equity in the firm. Maybe I can appeal to their local roots." The IP address was traced to Seattle. "Seattle?" Marcus frowned. "A genius coder in Seattle, hiding in plain sight?" "Yes, someone operating out of a basement or a garage." Richard grabbed a bottle of whiskey and poured himself a shot. "God, if I find out who it is, I'll kiss their feet. I need that code, Marcus. Without it, your company is worth 0, and my investment in you is gone." Marcus looked at the divorce papers still sitting on the kitchen island. He felt a strange unease, a flicker of a memory. Linda, sitting at the kitchen table late at night, typing furiously on her battered laptop. No, he thought, shaking his head. Impossible. She was writing essays for her linguistics degree. "Don't worry, Richard," Marcus said, regaining his composure. "It's probably some Microsoft dropout. We'll find them. And when we do, we'll charm them. Nobody says no to the Vanderwall-Sterling alliance." The flight to New York took less than 5 hours in the supersonic Gulfstream G700 that Vertex Global had sent. Linda spent the flight showering in the onboard bathroom, scrubbing the scent of her old life off her skin. She changed into the white suit. It fit perfectly, tailored to within an inch of its life. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the tired student. she saw E.V. Cypher. The plane landed at a private airstrip in Teterboro, and a helicopter whisked her directly to the roof of the Vertex Tower in Manhattan. The building was a monolith of black glass and steel, piercing the clouds, looking down on the Empire State Building as if it were a toy. As Linda stepped out of the helicopter, the wind whipping her hair, she was met by a phalanx of assistants. "Right this way, Dr. Vance." They led her down a spiral staircase into the executive penthouse. The room was silent, vast, and intimidating. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the city. At the center of the room sat a long table made of obsidian. Sitting at the head of the table was Silas Thorne. The chairman of Vertex Global was a legend. He was 70 years old, but looked 50. He had silver hair, eyes like chipped flint, and a reputation for eating competitors alive. He didn't stand up when Linda entered. He simply watched her. Linda walked the length of the room. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the floor. Click, click, click. She didn't falter. She didn't look down. She pulled out the chair opposite him and sat. "Dr. Vance," Silas said. His voice was like gravel grinding together. "You're younger than I expected, and prettier." "Mr. Thorne," Linda replied, her voice cool. "I'm not here to be looked at. I'm here to close. Did the transfer go through?" Silas smiled. It was a terrifying expression. He tapped a tablet on the table and slid it toward her. "Escrow released 3 minutes ago. $800 million, minus taxes and legal fees, has been deposited into your offshore holding in the Caymans, as requested." Linda looked at the screen. The number was so long, it looked like a phone number. 800,000 Sontor. She stared at it. It was freedom. It was power. It was the weapon she needed. "The code key is on this drive," Linda said, placing a small, silver USB drive on the table. "Project Ethelgard is fully operational. It will integrate with your existing systems within 12 hours. Silas picked up the drive, examining it like a diamond. "You realize what you've built, don't you? This isn't just translation software. This is a bridge. You've solved the Tower of Babel problem. With this, Vertex will control global communication." "I know what I built," Linda said. "That's why the price was 800 million. And worth every penny." Silas leaned back. "But now comes the fun part, the announcement. I prefer to stay anonymous, Mr. Thorne. Cipher works best in the shadows." "Usually I would agree," Silas said, steepling his fingers. "But we have a unique situation. My market analysts tell me that a certain firm in Seattle, Vanderwall Corp., was desperate for this tech, and a smaller subsidiary, Sterling Dynamics, is trying to launch a product next week that directly competes with us." Linda's eyes narrowed. "I am aware of them." "I did a little digging," Silas said, his eyes gleaming with malicious intelligence. "It seems your maiden name is Vance, but until this morning, your legal name was Sterling. Is that correct?" Linda didn't flinch. "It was. Interesting." Silas stood up and walked to the window. "I like aggressive takeovers, Dr. Vance. I like crushing the opposition. But I love a good story even more. Next Saturday, Vertex is hosting the Red Gala here in New York. Every major tech CEO, investor, and parasite will be there, including Richard Vanderwall and his new protege, Marcus Sterling." Linda's heart skipped a beat. "You invited them?" "I invited everyone. They're coming to see the unveiling of E.V. Cypher. They think they're going to meet a reclusive genius they can poach." Silas turned back to her. "I want you to be there. I want you to walk onto that stage. And I want you to look them in the eye when you tell the world that Vertex owns the future." Linda thought about Marcus. She thought about the way he had looked at her this morning, like she was trash, like she was nothing more than a hindrance to his legacy. She stood up. "I'll do it," she said. "But on one condition." "Name it." "I want full creative control over the rollout, and I want to buy a controlling stake in a specific company before the gala." Silas raised an eyebrow. "Which company?" "Sterling Dynamics." Silas laughed. It was a genuine, boisterous laugh. "You want to buy your ex-husband's company out from under him before he even knows you're rich?" "No," Linda corrected him, her eyes cold. "I don't want to buy it. I want to short it. I want to drive the stock price into the ground, buy the debt, and then foreclose on the assets. I want him to walk into that gala thinking he's a king and leave owning nothing but the suit on his back." Silas Thorne grinned, extending his hand. "Linda Vance, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership." Linda shook his hand. Just then, her personal phone, the old, cracked one she hadn't thrown away yet, buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Text message from Marcus. "Linda, I can't find the password for the server admin. I know you set it up. Stop being petty and text it to me. It's important." Linda looked at the message. She looked at Silas. "Is there a problem?" Silas asked. "No problem," Linda said. She typed a quick reply, hit send, and then dropped the phone into the trash can next to the obsidian table. Reply to Marcus. Access denied. The week following the divorce was a study in contrast. While Linda sat in a glass-walled conference room at Vertex Global's headquarters, surrounded by the sharpest financial minds from Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan, consultants Silas had brought in to assist his new partner, Marcus was watching his world unravel one line of code at a time. It started on Tuesday. At the Sterling Dynamics office in Seattle, the mood was frantic. The company's flagship product, a customer service chatbot used by 3 major airlines, had crashed. "What do you mean you can't reboot it?" Marcus screamed, slamming his hand on the desk of his lead engineer, a young man named Kevin who looked ready to pass out. "I can't access the root directory, sir," Kevin stammered. "The encryption key. It was changed manually every week. The system is asking for the current administrative hash. We tried the old ones. They don't work." "Who changed them?" Marcus demanded. Kevin swallowed hard. "The logs say, user admin EV. That was your wife, wasn't it?" Marcus felt a vain throb in his temple. "Linda. Of course." She handled the weekly security patches. It was a menial task, or so he had thought. He assumed she just pushed a button. He didn't realize she was manually re-encrypting the kernel to prevent hacks. "Just bypass it," Marcus yelled. "We can't. If we force it, the data corrupts. We'll lose the client history for Delta and United. We're talking about millions in liability lawsuits." Marcus pulled out his phone. He had blocked Linda's number on the day she left, a final petty act of dominance. Now he frantically unblocked her and dialed. "The subscriber you are calling is not available." He tried again and again. "Damn it!" He threw the phone onto the couch. Just then, Richard Vanderwall walked in. He looked older than he had a few days ago. His skin was grey, his eyes bloodshot. "Stop worrying about the chatbots, Marcus," Richard said, his voice hollow. "We have a bigger problem." "What could be bigger than our product failing?" "Our stock price." Richard threw a copy of the Wall Street Journal onto the desk. "Look at the market." Marcus looked at the ticker on the wall-mounted screen. Sterling Dynamics, SDYN, was down 14% in pre-market trading. "Why?" Marcus gasped. "We haven't even announced the glitch yet." "Someone is shorting us," Richard said, pouring himself a drink from Marcus's decanter. "Someone with deep pockets. They've been dumping large blocks of stock all morning, driving the price down, triggering panic selling. And it gets worse. Our line of credit with Citibank? It was just frozen." "Frozen? Why?" Because a holding company bought our debt, Richard said, taking a swig of scotch. A shell company called Nemesis Holdings, LLC. They bought our loans this morning, and they are calling them in immediately. They want full repayment of the $20 million by Friday, or they seize collateral. What's the collateral? Marcus whispered, dread pooling in his stomach. Everything. Richard looked him in the eye. The IP, the building, and my personal guarantee. Marcus sank into his chair. Who is Nemesis Holdings? I don't know, Richard said. But they are aggressive. They smell blood. Someone knows we missed out on the cipher deal, and they are moving in for the kill. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Okay, we can fix this. We just need a cash injection. If we can secure a partnership with Vertex Global, Silas Thorne's money will stabilize the stock. We just need to get to that gala on Saturday. That's a long shot, Marcus. Silas Thorne eats companies like ours for breakfast. We have no choice. Marcus stood up, buttoning his jacket, trying to summon the arrogance that usually carried him through. I'll charm him. I'll bring Tiffany. Silas likes beautiful women. We'll dazzle him. We'll pitch a merger. We just need to survive until Saturday. 3,000 miles away, inside the penthouse suite of the Plaza Hotel in New York, Linda sat in a silk robe, watching the Bloomberg terminal on her laptop. Sterling Dynamics. 18%. She took a sip of herbal tea. You're brutal, a voice said. Linda turned. Silas Thorne was sitting in the armchair across the room, reviewing a guest list. I'm just protecting my asset, Linda replied calmly. If I'm going to reveal myself as the architect of the future, I can't have my past dragging me down. I'm cleaning house. You bought their debt for pennies on the dollar, Silas mused. By Monday, you will effectively own your ex-husband. I don't want to own him, Silas, Linda said, closing the laptop. I want to evict him. Silas chuckled. The stylist is here. It's time to get you ready. Tonight isn't just a party, Linda. It's a coronation. Are you nervous? Linda stood up. She walked to the full-length mirror. She looked at her face. The face Marcus had called plain. The face, he said, blended into the wallpaper. No, she said. I'm not nervous. I'm ready to be seen. The Red Gala was the most exclusive event of the New York social season, held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The theme was Future Human. The steps of the Met were carpeted in crimson, flanked by paparazzi, shouting names that moved markets. Look this way, Mr. Musk. Over here, Mr. Zuckerberg. A limousine pulled up, and Marcus Sterling stepped out. He looked dashy in a tuxedo, though the dark circles under his eyes were expertly concealed with concealer. He reached back and helped Tiffany Vanderwall out of the car. Tiffany was wearing a dress that left little to the imagination, a sheer, sparkling silver gown that looked like a disco ball. She waved enthusiastically at the cameras, soaking in the attention. Stop posing, Tiffany, Marcus hissed under his breath, gripping her arm. We aren't here for Vogue. We are here to find Silas Thorne. You're hurting me, Tiffany whined, pulling away. Relax, babe. Daddy said you need to project confidence. You look like you're going to a funeral. If we don't close a deal tonight, it is a funeral, Marcus muttered. They ascended the stairs, flashing their invitations. The great hall of the Met had been transformed. Laser lights cut through the air, and a massive holographic display in the center of the room rotated the Vertex Global logo. The room was thick with power. Marcus spotted the CEO of Google chatting with a senator. He saw venture capitalists from Sequoia and Benchmark. There he is, Marcus whispered. At the far end of the room, standing near the Temple of Dendor, was Silas Thorne. He was holding court, surrounded by a tight circle of listeners. Let's go, Marcus said. He straightened his tie, grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter, and steered Tiffany toward the shark tank. As they approached, Richard Vanderwall intercepted them. He looked sweaty. "I tried to talk to him," Richard hissed. "His security blocked me. They said Mr. Thorne is waiting for his guest of honor to arrive before taking business queries." "Who is the guest of honor?" Tiffany asked, looking around. "Is it a celebrity?" "Nobody knows," Richard said. "Rumor is, it's Cypher, the mystery coder." Suddenly, the music stopped. The lights in the massive hall dimmed, leaving only a single spotlight on the grand staircase leading down to the temple. Silas Thorne stepped up to a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed. "Tonight, we celebrate the future. For months, the world has wondered who cracked the Athelgard Protocol, who built the bridge between man and machine. You speculated, you guessed. You were all wrong." A hush fell over the crowd. Marcus held his breath. Some said it was a team in China. Some said it was a government agency. But true genius is often solitary, and often overlooked. Silas gestured to the top of the staircase. "Please welcome my partner, the new Chief Technology Officer of Vertex Global, and the majority shareholder of the newly formed Ethelgard Systems, Dr. Linda Vance." The spotlight swung to the top of the stairs. For a moment, Marcus didn't process the name. Vance? That was Linda's maiden name. But surely. Then she stepped into the light. The air left the room. Linda was wearing a gown of liquid red silk, custom designed by Versace. It draped over her body like a second skin, bold, dangerous, and utterly commanding. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, fell in cascading waves around her shoulders. She wore diamonds around her neck that cost more than Sterling Dynamics' entire annual revenue. But it wasn't the dress. It was her eyes. They swept over the crowd with a predator's calm. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered, dropping her champagne glass. It shattered on the stone floor, but nobody looked. Marcus felt his knees buckle. He blinked, shaking his head. "It's a hallucination. It's the stress." But she began to walk down the stairs. Every step was a statement. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She reached the bottom and stood next to Silas Thorne. She took the microphone. "Thank you, Silas," she said. Her voice was amplified, crisp and confident, the voice of a woman who knew exactly what she was worth. "For a long time, I worked in the shadows. I let others take credit for my labor. I let others build their castles on my foundations. But today, the shadows are gone." She looked directly into the crowd, her eyes locked onto Marcus. He stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. He looked at the woman he had divorced 3 days ago, the woman he had handed $20,000 to, the woman he had called plain. She smiled at him. It was a small, terrifying smile. "The future," Linda said, never breaking eye contact with him, "is expensive, and some of you can no longer afford the price of admission." The crowd erupted in applause. Flashbulbs went off like a supernova. Linda handed the microphone back to Silas and stepped down into the crowd. A swarm of billionaires surrounded her instantly, offering hands, cards, and congratulations. Marcus stood on the periphery, paralyzed. "That's your wife," Richard Vanderwall whispered, his face pale as death. "Marcus, that's your wife." "Ex-wife," Tiffany corrected, her voice trembling. "He divorced her. On Tuesday." Richard turned to Marcus, his eyes wide with horror. "You divorced her. You divorced the woman who just invented the future. You divorced $800 million. "I didn't know," Marcus choked out. She was just a student." "She's walking this way," Tiffany squeaked, hiding behind Marcus. Linda was indeed moving through the crowd, flanked by security. She wasn't coming to them. She was heading toward the VIP exit. But their paths intersected. Marcus stepped forward. He couldn't help himself. Linda. The crowd quieted slightly, sensing the tension. Linda stopped. She turned slowly. She looked at Marcus, then at Tiffany, then at Richard. Her gaze was polite, distant, as if she were looking at strangers she vaguely remembered meeting once at a bus stop. "Hello, Marcus," she said. "Linda, Marcus's mind raced. "You look incredible. I had no idea you were working on this. Why didn't you tell me?" "You never asked," Linda said simply. "You were too busy talking." "Look, we need to talk," Marcus said, stepping closer, his desperation leaking out. "There's been a misunderstanding. The divorce. The papers. We can fix this. We can annul it. We're a team, remember? You and me. Sterling dynamics." Linda laughed. It was a soft, genuine laugh that cut him deeper than any insult. "Marcus," she said, leaning in, slightly so only he and the Vanderwalls could hear. "I don't want to be on your team. I just bought the stadium you're playing in," she signaled to her security detail. "Wait," Richard Vanderwall interjected, trying to salvage the situation. "Linda, darling, whatever differences you and Marcus have, business is business. Sterling Dynamics is a solid company. We should discuss a partnership, a merger between your tech and our infrastructure." Linda looked at Richard. "Mr. Vanderwall, I'm afraid that's impossible." "Why?" "Because Sterling Dynamics won't exist by Monday," Linda said calmly. "I own your debt, Richard. Nemesis Holdings is me. And since you can't pay the $20 million by close of business yesterday, I've already initiated foreclosure proceedings." Richard grabbed his chest, staggering back. Linda turned her gaze back to Marcus. She leaned in close, whispering in his ear. "You wanted a woman with power. You wanted a woman with status. You got her. Too bad she's the one signing your eviction notice." She pulled back, gave Tiffany a pitying glance, and walked away. "Enjoy the party," she called over her shoulder. "The champagne is on me." Monday morning in Seattle was usually a time of bustling energy, coffee runs, and ambitious stand-up meetings. But at the headquarters of Sterling Dynamics, the atmosphere was that of a morgue. Marcus hadn't slept since the gala. He sat in his office, wearing the same clothes he had worn all weekend. The expensive Italian leather chair felt like a trap. Outside his glass walls, employees were packing boxes. They knew. The news of the impending foreclosure had leaked to TechCrunch on Sunday night. The headline was brutal. From IPO to repo, the 70-hour collapse of Sterling Dynamics. The elevator doors opened. It wasn't Linda. It was a team of 6 men in dark suits, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. The lead man, holding a clipboard, walked straight into Marcus's office without knocking. "Marcus Sterling." "Yes," Marcus croaked. "I'm the liquidator appointed by Nemesis Holdings LLC, the man said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, the foreclosure on your commercial loans has been finalized. Security is here to escort you off the premises." "You can't do this," Marcus whispered, standing up. "I have rights." I called my lawyers." "Your lawyers resigned an hour ago, Mr. Sterling. Apparently your retainer check bounced." The liquidator gestured to the door. "Please leave your company laptop, your access badge, and your phone if it was paid for by company funds." Marcus stared at him. "This is my company. I built this." "Technically," the liquidator said, checking his clipboard. "Dr. Linda Vance built the core architecture. You just marketed it. And you did a poor job of managing the debt. Now, please. Or the officers will assist you." Marcus grabbed his coat. He walked. Out of the office, passing the rows of desks. His employees, the people he had promised stock options and bright futures, didn't look at him with respect. They looked at him with anger. He had led them off a cliff. He took the elevator down to the lobby. As he stepped out onto the sidewalk, clutching a cardboard box with a framed photo of himself and a stress ball, he saw a familiar white Porsche waiting at the curb. Tiffany. Hope surged in his chest. Tiffany was there. She had money. Her father had money. They could rebuild. He ran toward the car. "Tiff!" he called out, reaching for the handle. The window rolled down 3 inches. Tiffany was wearing sunglasses. She didn't unlock the door. "Hey, Marcus," she said, not looking at him. "Thank God you're here," Marcus panted. "It's a nightmare. Linda, she took everything. I need a ride to your dad's place. We need to strategize." Tiffany sighed, adjusting her sunglasses. "Yeah, about that. Daddy says I can't be seen with you anymore. It's bad for the brand." Marcus froze. "What?" "Your toxic assets, babe," Tiffany said, chewing gum. "I mean, you're broke. You're being sued by your own shareholders. And honestly, it's kind of embarrassing that your ex-wife completely outplayed you. I need a man who wins." "We're engaged!" Marcus yelled, slamming his hand on the door. "We're engaged," Tiffany corrected. She held up her left hand. The ring was gone. "I pawned it this morning. Consider it a severance package. Bye, Marcus." She rolled up the window. The Porsche engine roared, and she peeled away into traffic, leaving him standing on the curb in the rain. Marcus looked around. He had no car. It was leased by the company. He had no apartment. The rent was auto-paid by the company account, which was frozen. He reached into his pocket for his wallet. He had 3 credit cards. He walked to the nearest ATM and inserted his Platinum Amex. Declined. He tried the Visa. Declined. He tried his debit card. Insufficient funds. Linda hadn't just taken the company. She had triggered the clauses in his personal guarantees. The banks had frozen his personal assets to cover the corporate losses. He checked his pocket. He had a $20 bill and some loose change. He sat down on the wet bench at the bus stop. The same bus stop Linda used to wait at when she was working double shifts to fund his dream. The irony tasted like ash in his mouth. 6 months later. The rain in Seattle hadn't changed. It was still the same relentless grey drizzle that slicked the streets and chilled the bones. But for Marcus Sterling, everything else about the city was unrecognizable. He wasn't watching the rain from the climate-controlled comfort of a penthouse balcony or the back seat of a town car. He was watching it through the condensation-fogged window of the Daily Grind, a mid-range coffee franchise on 4th Avenue, while he scraped gum off the underside of a table. "Hey, Sterling, we're low on almond milk. Check the back." The voice belonged to Tyler, the shift supervisor. Tyler was 22 years old, had a neck tattoo of a barcode, and delighted in ordering around a man twice his age who used to be on the cover of tech magazines. "On it," Marcus muttered, straightening up. His lower back screamed in protest. He was wearing the standard-issue uniform, a polo shirt that was slightly too tight around the arms, and a green apron that smelled perpetually of stale espresso grounds. It had been a brutal, humbling descent. The foreclosure of Sterling Dynamics had been swift and absolute. The bankruptcy courts had stripped him of everything to pay off the creditors. The penthouse, gone. The Audi, repossessed. Even his bespoke suits had been sold to a consignment shop to pay for the deposit on a studio apartment he now shared with 2 roommates in a neighborhood he used to warn Tiffany to avoid. Tiffany. He hadn't seen her since that day on the curb. Rumor had it she was dating a hedge fund manager in Chicago. Marcus tried not to think about it. He tried not to think about a lot of things. He walked into the storage room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. He grabbed a crate of almond milk, his hands rougher than they used to be. He remembered how soft his hands were when he signed those divorce papers. He remembered the weight of the Mont Blanc pen. Now, the only thing he signed were delivery receipts with a chewed-up ballpoint. As he hauled the crate back out to the front counter, the atmosphere in the shop shifted. Usually, it was a cacophony of milk steamers, indie folk music, and the clatter of laptops. But now, it was quieter. Customers were looking up from their MacBooks. Conversations paused. Everyone was looking at the large flat-screen TV mounted above the condiment station. "Turning now to our top story in tech," the news anchor announced. Her voice was excited, breathless. It's been 6 months since the historic acquisition of the Ethelgard Protocol and the mysterious EV cipher, now known to the world as Dr. Linda Vance, is finally breaking her silence on her next move. Marcus froze. The crate of milk slipped slightly in his grip before he hoisted it onto the counter. He shouldn't look. He knew it would hurt. But he couldn't turn away. The screen cut to a live feed. Linda was sitting in a sunlit studio opposite a famous talk show host. She looked magnificent. She wasn't wearing the aggressive red revenge dress from the gala. She was wearing a soft cream blazer, her hair loose and wavy. She looked calm, settled. There was a quiet authority in her posture that Marcus had never seen when they were married, or perhaps he had simply never bothered to look for it. "Dr. Vance," the host said, leaning in. "You're the wealthiest self-made woman in the state. You could have bought an island. You could have started a space company. Instead, you just purchased the defunct headquarters of Sterling Dynamics. Why buy back the building of a failed company?" Marcus felt the eyes of the customers on him. A few regulars knew who he was, the fallen CEO serving their lattes. They glanced from the TV to him, whispering behind their hands. On the screen, Linda smiled. It wasn't malicious. It was wistful. "That building represents a lesson," Linda said softly. "It's where I spent 7 years hiding my potential because I was told I wasn't business material. I bought it so no one else has to hide there." "Tell us about the new project," the host prompted. "We are renaming the building the Vance Institute," Linda explained. "It will be a tuition-free accelerator for coders who don't fit the traditional mold. Single mothers, immigrants, people without Ivy League degrees. We're going to give them the funding and the faith that I never received." Marcus gripped the edge of the counter until his knuckles turned white. She was rebuilding his failure into a monument to her success. She was taking the site of his greatest ego trip and turning it into a sanctuary for the people he had ignored. "That is truly inspiring," the host said. "But I have to ask, the rumor mill is buzzing about a certain item you carry in your wallet. Is it true you kept a memento from your ex-husband?" The coffee shop went dead silent. Even Tyler stopped making drinks. Linda laughed, a genuine bright sound. "Yes, it is." She reached into the inner pocket of her blazer and pulled out a small, rectangular piece of paper. The camera zoomed in. It was the check. "Pay to the order of Linda Vance. Amount, 20,000 memo, divorce settlement." The signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Marcus Sterling. "I keep this," Linda said, holding it up like a holy relic, "because it reminds me of my baseline. This was the value placed on me by the person who knew me best, or thought he did. He told me I was worth $20,000 and a used Honda." She lowered the check, looking directly into the camera lens. "Every time I walk into a boardroom full of men who doubt me, every time I negotiate a billion-dollar contract, I touch this piece of paper. It reminds me that someone's estimation of you does not define your reality. It defines their limitations." The host nodded solemnly. If Marcus is watching right now, is there anything you'd want to say to him? Marcus stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to the pixels on that screen. He saw the face he had kissed 1,000 times, the eyes he had woken up to. Linda paused. She seemed to look through the camera, across the city, straight into the dingy coffee shop on 4th Avenue. "I don't hate him," Linda said. Her voice was gentle, which was worse than if she had screamed. "Hate takes energy. I just pity him. He had a partner who would have walked through fire for him. He traded her for a reflection in a mirror. So, no words. Just, thank you. You didn't break me, Marcus. You freed me." The segment ended, cutting to a commercial for life insurance. The spell in the coffee shop broke. The noise returned. The steamers hissed. The chatter resumed, louder now. "Damn," Tyler whistled, shaking his head. "She roasted you, man. That was cold." Marcus stood there, numb. The $20 bill in the tip jar caught his eye. 20,000. $20. He realized then that he hadn't just lost a fortune. He hadn't just lost a company. He had lost the only person in the world who had loved him when he was nobody. And now that he was nobody again, he was truly alone. "Sterling!" Tyler barked. "Table 4 needs wiping. Move!" Marcus blinked, wiping a sudden moisture from his eye with the back of his hand. He picked up the wet rag. "Coming," he whispered. He turned away from the screen, away from the woman who owned the future, and walked back out to the tables to clean up the mess. And that is the story of Marcus and Linda. It serves as a brutal reminder that in the ledger of life, the most valuable assets are never the ones listed on the stock exchange. They are the people who stand beside you in the trenches. Marcus spent his life chasing the illusion of power, only to realize too late that he had discarded the very source of it. He traded a diamond for a stone because he was too blinded by his own reflection to see the shine. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve his fate, or was the punishment too harsh? If you were Linda, would you have helped him, or let him fall? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, karma, and ultimate redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a drama. We post new stories every week. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you underestimate. They might just own your future.